this here, and then we'll try and go live on the Book of Faces. Chris, a lot of our community I was mentioning are entrepreneurs and are business owners and are looking looking for something and looking for some guidance and some direction on how to handle what is unprecedented for a lot of them, in regards to financially, economically, career-wise. And so we have been putting on calls over the last couple of days to give people that direction, because it seems like a lot of people just kind of threw up their hands. And I know I felt that myself, the first maybe day or two of, kind of this woe is me kind of thing. But as, being around this community and as we listen to some of the other calls, you start to realize that you have control, whatever control that is, you do have some control. And so we couldn't think of someone better who was good at finding, opportunities in frankly a shit show. And so we thought it would be good to just talk about what some of those opportunities are, what people should be paying attention to, what people can be doing. I know we've talked a little bit about, what specifically are some of those opportunities, or what are some mindset just those kinds of, almost tactical things that people are in a place where they've never been before. So we thought that having a call like this would be valuable. Tim, do you want to add anything to that, or do you feel like that kind of sums up how we got here?
Yeah, I just wanted to help our community find their way during difficult times. I know we have nobody better than Lochhead to kind of take a step back, look where we are and look where we can going forward as far as helping our community communicate to everybody in their lives, be a source of inspiration and direction in confusing times. So without further ado, Christopher, I'd kind of like to just let you roll through what you feel is the best way you can help us today. And I'm sure we're going to get questions from our community. And if you do have questions, please put them in the chat. But Christopher, just like to hear from you. What are you doing? Where do you see us as a community, as individuals, and how can we best help our community not only survive this, but land on their feet, thrive, come out on the other side better, and then throw down the rope to help others, which is what we're all about at One Life. So what say you, Christopher?
Well, first of all, it's great to see you, Timmy, and I really appreciate everybody getting together. I'm reminded of that Hunter S. Thompson quote, one of my all-time favorites. When the going gets weird, the weird turn professional. And am I allowed to swear on this?
Yeah, you know what, Christopher? I pre-warned people that this would not be PG rated. So yeah, be yourself, man. I think in times like this, we want to be real with people, and that's what I love about you, Christopher. Is you're down to earth. You call it like you see it. And for today, in these Hunter S. Thompson type days, be full on Lochhead, dude.
Yeah, so it's pretty fucking weird, right? I mean, it's beyond weird. And I don't even know what words to use to describe it. The thing that is fascinating is we are all experiencing it together. And even if you think about something in our lifetimes in the United States or in North America, like a 9/11, where we had this incredible shared experience, it wasn't an experience the entire world shared. And so this is an extraordinary thing that we're living through. And I think we'll talk about the positive side in a second, but I think we just have to state the obvious. It's fucking weird, and it's easy to get freaked out. And so I think that's just the reality of where many of us are. That said, extraordinary times call for legendary leaders. And while I think we can all be freaked out, and we'll all be freaked out at points down the road in this thing, um, legends stand up. Legendary leaders ask themselves, if I was a legendary leader, what would I do? What would I do today?
Yeah, you got it.
What's going on, Tim? Something crazy going on at your house?
The plumber just showed up and Zoe's going off. So, during crazy times, there's normal times too.
Well, you need the plumber to make sure the toilet works, and particularly after you're stocked up on all that toilet paper, right?
I don't know what Tina's got going, but keep going.
And so, I think first things first. We have to protect ourselves, and we have to protect our communities, right? So the obvious thing that needs to get said is we have to listen to the experts. And there was a story today in the New York Times that said the best thing we could do right now would be, and these are my words, but radical social distancing. Just lock yourself down. And I saw in the news this morning that Italy has essentially done that now. So I think we have to take this stuff pretty seriously. When I was yesterday, I talked to my a buddy of mine who lives in Maui, and there's still plane loads of people landing in Maui going on vacation. And on the island, they only have one hospital, and if I remember right, 35 respirators. And so you have all these people flying to Hawaii right now, thinking they'll go on vacation during this thing. And so it's time to get radical with paying attention to what the experts, and I'm of course not a healthcare expert by any stretch, but what the experts are telling us to do. And let me see if I can just grab this quote from the New York Times this morning. It says, quote, "The next priority, experts said, is extreme social distancing. If it were possible to wave a magic wand and make all Americans freeze in place for 14 days while sitting 6 feet apart, epidemiologists say the whole epidemic would sputter to a halt." So can we get Americans to freeze in place for 14 days, 6 feet apart, to get this thing to halt? So that's the most recent thing I've seen vis-a-vis what's going on with the spread of the coronavirus. Now, I think there's a couple things we need to get to from the business side of things, right? One is, what is have you done an accurate pipeline review right now? What's going on with your customers? What's going on with your pipeline? And what's going on with your forecast? And I've talked to a lot of business leaders, as you might imagine, since this thing started. And, I have people who their pipeline is down, and their bookings, their sales are now down 95%. A friend in the restaurant business, supplies, sells various things to restaurants. They're down 90 to 95%. Some in the tech industry, their forecasts are coming down. I think they're going to be roughly 50% of where they were a couple of weeks ago, and might go lower. And so I think it's important to get a handle on the front end of your business. What's going on with your customers? What's going on with your sales pipeline and funnel, and therefore forecast? What's happening to sales, bookings, revenue right now, and how does that flow through to cash flow? So I think we have to get a handle on what's going on, and depending on what kind of industry you're in, what kind of business you're in, we don't know what we're staring down here. We're probably going to take the better part of a quarter off from an economic standpoint, and who knows? Some of us may end up taking half a year off. That is to say, losing 50% of our revenue or sales for the year. That is a possibility now. And of course, there's worse possibilities we could all think of. But I think at a high level, and again, it's different for different businesses, but at a high level, we all have to be ready to lose somewhere between a quarter to half of our sales for the year. And so I think we sort of have to get our mind around what that means, and get, right now, facts are our friends, both about the virus itself, of course, but from a purely business point of view, what's going on with our customers? What's going on with our pipeline, what's going on with our sales, and its flow through impact, particularly on our cash flow and our cash position. And of course, and I'll take a breather here in a sec, that all lets us then go to a conversation. What do we need to be doing for our employees, and what do we need if we have employees in our business, and what do we need to be doing for our customers? The CEO of AT&T came out this morning, and let's see if I got this right. He said, we're at wartime. Let me get you the exact quote. He said, "This is a time of war." His name is Randall Stevenson. He said, "This is a time of war. This is like This is like World War II, and everybody needs to step up and do their part in terms of how we help the general population and the general public." And then he goes on to say that one of the things AT&T is now doing is they are not charging for increased usage and overage on their data network, and there's a series of other things that they're going to be doing. But it just gives you a sense of where we're at. When you have Fortune 500 CEOs saying this is like World War II. And so I think we got to get very, very real with what's going on with our business. And then that leads to a conversation about how can we do the best job possible for our employees, our people, our customers, and of course our community. So that's sort of off the top a set of things that are on my mind. We recently did a podcast on 7 crisis marketing ideas, which we can get into if that makes sense. But let me take a pause there and get your thoughts and reactions to me.
Yeah, Christopher, you're spot on. Where people should be right now is, if we can all just chill, take a step back, spend some more time at home, self-isolate for the next few weeks. I think it's going to get warmer. I think we can beat this thing and have it go away. And then and then I think the candidly real work becomes, how do we put Humpty Dumpty back together again? And that's what we want to talk about today, is how can we not only survive, but land on our feet, thrive, figure out how to reinvent ourselves better, and then throw down the rope and help our friends do the same. And that's what we as a community, that's what we're all about. And it's time for we leaders. And if you're on this call today, you are a leader. You're getting your information on how to best navigate this and take this out to everybody. So we're so lucky to have somebody like Christopher on this call to help us best do that. And Christopher, I guess I think the best thing to do is to let you just roll and go through what you said on your crisis marketing call. If anybody has any specific questions for Christopher, we can put them in the chat. And then, we'll just come up for air every now and then as you see fit. Because dude, there's, who they came for. So why don't you drive the bus and take us where you want to go, bro? And wherever you need me, catch up and give you a sip of water or something, let me know.
All right. Thank you. So maybe off the top, the next thing would be, okay, so what does the smartest research and some of the smartest thinkers in business, what do they tell us about how to navigate an economic downturn?
Hey, Chris, would it give you any insight? I don't know if you saw the polls, but I asked if their business or income has been impacted over the last several weeks, and I can share the results right now. What's interesting is that it's pretty. We're pretty across the board. We've got answers all over, and so there's people on the call who are affected minorly, and then there's people I put that it's a shit show over here, and we had about 20% of the call who have been hit hard, or it looks like almost 40% of the call has been hit hard. So I just thought that might give you some context into where people are at, and maybe that gives you a different lens for what you're about to get into.
Yeah, I think that's a cool insight. It's the fact that 30% are saying, yes, I've been affected, and another 32% are saying, yes, a little bit. And it's been smaller numbers on the sort of more extreme affected part. I guess that's not too surprising because it depends on when you want to say this thing started. But I don't know, are we 2 weeks into this thing, 3 weeks into this thing? We're certainly at least 2 weeks, 3 weeks into an economic downturn of one sort or another. And my guess is if we take that poll next week, those numbers will just start gravitating towards the more severe and of course there will be outliers, and there's certain businesses in some ways that will be advantaged by this. But in general, I think most of us in our businesses and frankly in our personal incomes, our personal net worths, it's all going down with very few exceptions. And I think that's just the reality. And so the question is, okay, so what can we learn from the past? And if you go out about 2 or so weeks ago, I started trying to get my arms around a lot of the best research and the best thinking around what companies in the past have done to navigate downturns. And I put a click through in the chat. We've got links to a whole bunch of them on our website, so you can see them at the end of the show notes for that episode. But here's what the literature says if you sort of read what McKinsey and Bain and Harvard Business Review and that sort of crowd say about this stuff. And this is, of course, a synthesis, but essentially it says to be successful in a downturn, the companies that are successful have to break very hard coming in, and then be very thoughtful throughout the downturn. And these are my words now. Be what you could think of as thoughtfully aggressive. So, of course, there's a bunch of defense to be played here. I mean, the defense, what we're doing on the personal side is we're staying fucking home, right? And so there's a lot of defense to be played here for sure. But there's also some offense that can be played. And we'll talk about some of those offensive things. And I think both we can be aggressive defensively and aggressive offensively. And so I think rather than be reactionary, this idea of being thoughtfully aggressive, and particular as we break into the downturn into our in our businesses. And then what most of the research and thinking says is we're thoughtfully aggressive throughout the downturn. We're making adjustments in a real-time basis, very reaction-oriented, very elastic, very flexible, the businesses that are successful. Companies look for opportunity where they see them. And one of them, this is going to sound outrageous, one of them is companies will do acquisitions. This morning, TechCrunch announced that the New York Times just purchased a company that takes text and converts it into audio. And so as a podcaster, I found that fascinating because to me, it's just more proof that people want to consume audio, that audio is the future. But also from a purely business point of view, here's the New York Times facing potentially a massive takedown in advertising dollars, right, as a media company. And yet they're going out and making a strategic acquisition to position themselves for the future. So that's sort of thoughtfully aggressive in my mind. And then if you're able to do that, and we can unpack that at any level of detail and brainstorm and talk about it any way you want. But here's the other thing the research says, depending on whose data you want to look at, somewhere between 9 and 14% of companies actually outperform competitors by at least 10% in sales and profit as they come out of the downturn. And from a category point of view, we know that new categories do get created. Categories get redesigned and re-swizzled in downturns. And so there are interesting category creation, category design, and category redesign opportunities to position yourself for real strength coming out of this thing. And then the other thing I'll say, sort of in this sort of next wave of sort of stuff that's been on my mind, Tim, I was on text this morning with a dear friend of mine, an extraordinary marketer, an entrepreneur in Australia. And I forget exactly how many employees he has, but somewhere around 40-ish. And he was we were going back and forth around, what he should do with his people. And the sort of back and forth was really, he's got enough cash in the business to easily pay everybody with no revenue coming in while they're social distancing at home for 3 months, for sure. And he could probably stretch it at almost 100% salary for 6 months, but not sure he could do that yet. But he's trying to figure out how not to lay people off, right? So what we get back, the back and forth that we're getting into over text this morning is, and I think this is a tough decision that we have to make, but I think we can have conversations. And I think if you're a company leader or CEO or entrepreneur or business owner, I think you can have an open dialogue with people about this. I don't think we need to do this in the shadows, which is, what would most people want? Would they want you to be more aggressive now so that you can stretch that? If you've got 3 months of runway that you could pay your people, is there a way to turn that into 6 months? Or if you have 6 months, is there a way to turn that into 8 months or 12 months by doing something like saying to your people, hey, listen, in this example, we have 3 months worth of runway. We could pay everybody in the company your whole salary for 3 months. And then after that, it starts to get real sketchy. Do you want us to do that? Or, and this is just an idea, do you want 60% of your salary now so that we can stretch this thing out? So if we're in this for 6 months or God only knows more, we're being very parsimonious on the front end. But we're doing everything we can to keep your jobs and keep you on the payroll. And so we're trying to stretch the payroll out as long as we can. So I think these are things we need to be thinking about and talking about. And I think historically business leaders have shied away, have tried to have these conversations behind closed doors. I don't think we need to do that. I think people aren't stupid. If you're a business owner, a business leader, say, look, we're trying to do everything we can for our customers, our partners, our investors, and of course, our people. And we're trying to have thoughtful conversations about that and get groups of people together to figure out how we can save money and how we can stretch whatever cash we have based on a declining sales that are happening right now. So I think these are the kinds of conversations that we need to have. And I think we can I think a lot of companies are going to lock down and try to have these conversations all behind closed doors. I think we can engage our people in the conversation about what are smart ways to be parsimonious, make reallocations, make strategic cuts, and how we can stretch out our position. And so that's on my mind a lot, and was helping an entrepreneur friend of mine this morning deal with that kind of a situation. But I'll take a pause there, Timmy, and get your thoughts and reactions.
Yeah, I've been on a lot of conversations with GoBundance and just friends of mine, and just the wise people I'm talking to are preparing for the worst and making the best happen. And this may be something that's just a blip, and the virus gets solved in the next month or two. After some things like this, like World War II ending, there's been such a rush of excitement back out in the streets. It was kind of like you had people coming out of this quickly, and that's the best we can hope for. And if that happened, it would probably be a 3 to 6 month downturn. It is going to be that. Plan for that, guys. This is not going to end in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And the worst you could plan for is, things taking a turn for the worse, and the economy taking a big hit, and things getting really bad. And I think it's, you need to prepare for that in your own way of what might that look like, just so you have it there, and then just do your best to make the best for you happen, and help those around you, cushion the blow, and help those around you learn and grow through this. I think one thing good that's going to come from it is people are realizing debt sucks, and Visa is nowhere you want to be. And it's a time to examine your whole lifestyle and look at, no matter what happens here, how can I ensure the next time that something like this happens, once we do get through this, I'm in a better place down the road. So I think that's what people around me are, thinking. Christopher, what are you seeing with those that you serve and love?
I think it depends. Your thinking on this depends on how much cash runway you have personally and or as a business, right? So if you're somebody who just lost all of your source of income, and you don't have much savings, which is the average American, then you're staring something spooky in the face right now. And this is where many of us will have no choice but to rely on the kindness of others. And hopefully our government is going to get this right here soon. It looks like they're marching down a path. They're going to argue, but hopefully in a day or two or a few here, they're going to pass something that gets money into the hands of average Americans. So I think part of it is how close you are, and how reliant you are on other people's kindness at this moment. And the more reliant you are on other people's kindness to help you get through this, the spookier this is. So I think that's a reality. I also think that, we just dropped an episode of my podcast today with Tucker Max, the legendary bad boy Tucker Max. Thank you so much, Timmy. I've enjoyed getting to know him. And he, his book, I hope they serve beer in hell. It's not my kind of book, but it's a legendary title.
Yeah.
Anyway, he's a fascinating guy, as you know, and a little kind of a philosopher king. And one of the things we talk about in our podcast is he thinks that this is going to be the cause of the creation of what he calls the new golden age. That we are going to come through this changed and in general changed for the positive. And so I think that's a powerful idea to soak in. And I think to your point, and I don't mean this in any negative or cold way, but I think for people who are staring down a really tough financial time here, I think over time, hopefully more people will start to think about, well, what could I do to change my position in life so that I would be more self-reliant in the case of the shit hitting the fan. And again, I don't mean that in any critical way, but I do think it will have people start to think about their own personal financial security in a different way. And I think that would be very positive.
Yeah. Hey, Chris, we do have a question. Somebody asked, with all the trade shows canceled with virtual trade show platforms, do you recommend a Band-Aid to communicate to market?
I'm not sure if I understand the question.
Yeah.
Is the question really around, should you start doing virtual events or digital trade shows? Or
I think Christopher, the question kind of revolves around, do we look for a short-term fix to get us through these next couple of months, or are we looking for full-scale changes in how we operate, fundamental changes in how we operate in our business and generate revenue? Is it kind of a small fix that we need to just, plug a leak until we get to the end of this, or should they start looking now to make, a large-scale changes to the way they do things?
I think at this moment, assume DEFCON 5. So be very, very aggressive. Assume the worst. And we can plan for the worst. We can prepare for the worst without being a negative person, without making it a self-fulfilling prophecy, because none of us want to do that. But at the same time, this is a time to be very wide-eyed. This is a time to be paying the fuck attention, right? To our business, to our health, to our community, to our country, and of course to the world. And so we got to pay attention right now. And so I think you have to assume the worst case scenario and plan against that. And so as it relates to trade shows and so forth, look, I think whatever kind of digital gathering, I think that's a great idea. And also, people are doing all sorts of cool things right now. And this technology that we're on, Zoom, I've gotten to know Eric Yuan a little bit. He's the founder of Zoom. He's been on my podcast a couple of times, as you may know. They donated their technology to every K through 12 school in the United States so that we can do long distance learning. People are starting to get together and have cocktail parties. People are getting married on Zoom and other, digital communication technology. Of course, FaceTime, all these things, right? So I think there are new ways to do things. And new models will emerge, but I think you should assume it's going to be like this for a while. And so if you were planning, I was booked to speak at a CEO event in Pebble Beach in September. That got canceled 3 weeks ago, right? And the company that's doing that is now doing a series of webinars and so forth. And so I think that's just what we're going to see. And in the event that things get better faster and you want to do a CEO event in September and that turns out to be a doable thing, you'll probably have the hotel space to do it. But for the time being, I think we have to plan that's not going to happen, and we have to look at digital things and other things to replace those events. Particularly if those events are critical to driving revenue in our business.
Yeah, definitely. Zoom, boy, what's their stock done since this whole thing started? It's probably doubled.
Let me take a look. And Eric is an amazing guy and an incredible leader. So in the last 5 days, it looks like it's up 27%.
Wow.
Yeah. So on March 20th, it was at 129, and today it's at 158.
Yeah, their market cap's up $2 billion. Wow.
Their market cap is massively up because last time I looked, they were a $20 to $25 billion company, and now they're a 43, almost $44 billion company. If you go back a little further, Timmy, on March 17, the stock was at 103. So, yeah, they're going to double their market cap in a pretty short period of time if they stay on this trajectory. They're going to go from, actually, it depends on when you want to count it. Last time I looked, they were around 25, so they're close to doubling now.
Yeah. Somebody put in the chat that their market cap is 36 billion, and Marriott is 24 billion. And yeah, bigger gap.
Is that Andrew Smallwood who posted that? Is that who that is?
Yeah.
Oh, good to see you, Andrew. I hope you're well, buddy.
Hey, Christopher, another question came in from Rich Curtis, and he put his some more thorough scenario down there. But to sum it up, he says that his income pretty much dried up because he works with local businesses, and so his question is, does he continue to serve and take a more heart-centered approach and offer and work with the businesses that he's currently working with, kind of pro bono, in a way to eventually help them once they get out of this, or does someone take a different route and whatever that not going with your heart, or kind of the go get a job type mentality or go make money right now mentality, where do you land on a question like that?
Obviously we all have to find the right line that we're going to walk here. It would be irresponsible, Rich, for any of us to neglect ourselves or our families. And so if there are things you can do in the near term, I'm just looking at your note here in the chat. You got a 5-month runway. I think that sounds like a good runway. If there's things that you can do to extend it, I think that would be great. I think there are going to be many ways to extend it. There are a lot of private companies that are doing interesting things. I saw yesterday that Hyundai, for example, if you want to buy a new car, there's a whole bunch of things they're doing, incentives. I think 6 months without having to pay, or I can't remember the details, but there's a whole bunch of Scooby snacks that are pretty significant if you're buying a car. More interesting, they came out and they said, if you financed a car through us, we'll give you up to, right now, as of now, we'll give you up to 3 months relief on car payments, 1 month at a time, and you got to contact them and so forth. And so, there are companies that are doing things along those lines. And so I think hopefully there will be more opportunities to extend your runway. And I think there are creative things, hopefully, that you can do to maybe take that 5-month runway and turn it into a 7-month runway. So I'd be stunned that a 5 to 7 month runway wouldn't get you through this. But again, I don't know. So I think on one hand, be thoughtful. It's irresponsible not to take care of yourself. If you think about first responders, sort of rule number one as a first responder is don't make yourself a victim. So I think if there are things that you can do to extend your runway and or supplement your income right now as an individual or frankly as a business, if there's deals you can get done, if there's things you can sell, then sell those things, and be responsible and try to take care of yourself. That said, I think it is a time for radical generosity.
Explain that.
Look, there's some smart people saying we're overreacting. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. Okay. Although I'll take a look. I used to have that on a sticker on my skis once. I'm not a doctor, but I'll take a look. But I digress. You got to have some gallows
humor right now, Lochhead. Way to go.
But when the head of the World Health Organization comes out and says it's a global pandemic, it's probably a global pandemic. So I think act accordingly. At least that's that's where my head's at. And so I think radical generosity will make a tremendous difference. And be generous in ways that you can be generous. Generosity is not, of course, not at all limited to financial things. Right now, saying hello or good morning to somebody might be an act of generosity. And so, for example, in our neighborhood, we have a neighborhood email list of the vast majority of the people who live within a couple block radius of where I'm sitting right now. And ever since this thing started, that email list has all been about, hey, let's stick together. We can get through this together. Hey, I'm going to make a Target run. Does anybody need anything? If you're an older person and you're fearful of being alone, how can I help you? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And so I think just acting in a generous way, being generous of spirit. And then, listen, if we have things that we can give, that we can contribute, then we need to do that. Right now, I'm trying to put together a deal. And without going through all the details, through a relationship that I have with someone who works at a food distribution company that distributes, of course, their business is almost gone. One of the things that restaurants buy are gloves. And there are no restaurants, for the most part, buying gloves right now. And so they have cases and cases of gloves. So I'm trying to broker a deal where we buy it. We're trying to see if we can get 50 cases of gloves purchased from this food distribution company to donate it to our local hospitals here in Santa Cruz. So I think another story I love right now, speaking of people who are walking a tough line, Alex Holt, who was also on the podcast quite some time ago now. He's an entrepreneur, former professional hockey player, played on the San Jose Sharks, got injured. His family had been in the restaurant business. He started this very successful chain of restaurants called Flights. And he was in the process of getting ready to franchise and really ramp up. It had opened a big flagship in Vegas and so forth and so on. But he started here in Silicon Valley in Los Gatos. Anyway, his business is basically destroyed. It's over. And as it was all coming to a crumble, he realized, well, I have this ability to feed people. My business is probably destroyed. There's no point in making any more money right now because we're going down no matter what. So how do I take everything that I got and give it away to the most needy at this time? So that was his first move. And then his second move was to reach out to other restaurants, other people in the food service industry to try to help him do that. And then he put up a GoFundMe. And I believe he's asking for $100,000. I believe he's about 35 or 33, somewhere in that. And so now he's blown through his inventory. They got volunteers, and he set up a hashtag Feed the Need, and he's trying to feed people in the South Bay of the Bay Area for free right now. So my point in sharing that story with you is here you have an entrepreneur who literally, at the moment, his dream and the Flights thing was he was nailing it. I mean, just absolutely blowing up in a wonderful way. His whole dream comes crashing down, and he's in personal and economic ruin. And what does the guy do? The guy says, how do we feed the people who need it the most? And I think we're seeing a lot of that in our country and a lot of that in our world, and it's incredibly inspiring. And so I don't know if that's helpful, Rich. Hopefully it is. But I think we're all trying to walk a line between how do we secure the safety, the financial security and safety of our families and our closest friends. I think that's a responsible thing to be doing. And at the same time, now's the time for radical generosity. And when you see a guy like Alex who says, my business is kind of fucked anyway, let's just turn straight into this thing and start helping. And I'll deal with my destroyed dreams and financial ruin when this thing's over. There'll be time enough for counting when the dealing's done, and the dealing is far from done.
So, Chris, we have 3 new questions in the chat, and I think I want to take Andrew Smallwood's first, and if you can look at that. And Scott and Rajas, we will get to your questions, but Andrew asked, can you talk some more examples of converting, quote, a vitamin into an aspirin, unquote? How we, the problem solvers, can define and evolve where meet people where they are right now. So how can we, think out of the box to help people who are hurting, and what can we do?
Yeah, and that was from Andrew?
Andrew Smallwood.
Hey, Andrew, I'm so stoked you're here. So if you go back to the sort of core principles of category design, the bigger, the more strategic, the more urgent the problem, the more time, money, and energy people apply to the solution, right? And we see that at a meta level like we've never seen before as a world with the virus itself. And so as it relates to our business, how do we think about the problem that our business solves in the context of the environment we're all in today, such that people begin to view your business and your category as a solution to a problem worth solving right now? So for example, I mentioned Tucker, right? Today, I think he's starting today. He's getting radically generous with their intellectual capital, their intellectual property. So if you're an IP-based business, and many of us are, and even if you don't think you are, there's probably some IP in your business that somebody would find cool. So he's essentially giving away his how to write a book shit for free that he used to charge for. Now, he's not giving you the service, but he's giving you the methodology and all the Scooby snacks around the methodology. And so he just took some, he might even say in the podcast, but he just took some meaningful amount of shit that he used to get paid a lot for and just said, okay, bam, this is now all free. And so if you're somebody who is at home and you've always dreamt of writing a book, and now all of a sudden you have some time, bam, I'm going to give you with my company, all the Scooby snacks, all the IP about how to go do that. Bless you. And so that's an example of, that's a thing that he used to charge for that he's now giving away for free. Now, is it a life problem called I need to write a book and I need to write one now? No. On the Maslow hierarchy of needs, Andrew, is that sort of, if you're worried about, to quote George Bush, how to keep food on your family, are you going to be thinking about a problem called how do I utilize the coronavirus time that I have to write that book I've always wanted to write? Probably not. But if you're somebody who has dealt with your economic security or you're somebody who said, fuck it, I'm not even going to count right now and whatever, I'm not dealing with that now, wherever your headset is, the point being, if the idea of utilizing this time to write a book is an interesting one to you, he's now giving this stuff away. And in so doing, he's kind of, if you will, evangelizing why his point of view that everybody should write a book makes sense. And so I think that's a cool thing to be doing. And so hopefully that answers your question. But by doing something radical or ideally being able to communicate a point of view that sort of sits into the mindset of where we are as a human race right now, you increase the likelihood that people prioritize your category. So if you use the Tucker example, maybe you weren't thinking about writing a book with this free time, but maybe once you hear that he's doing this radical thing, and then you hear his point of view that says everybody should write a book because blah, 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 he has a whole point of view about that, then maybe a problem you didn't know you had just showed up, which is, how do I use this coronavirus time to write that book I always thought I would write? And so it's an example of company does radically generous thing, sparks some attention, has a radical point of view about the category. People now pay attention to the point of view about the category because of the radical generosity, and maybe that builds some pipeline. And so you have an example of a company trying to do well, that is to say, make money during the shitstorm while doing good. And I think that's a fucking good thing. Now is a good time to do good things. And for many of us, the aha, and I've had this aha myself, which is like, what's the thing that I can most contribute? And for many of us, that's what our company does, or that's what we do as a professional. And if you're an expert at X, figure out how to give away a lot of X. And look, it's okay to monetize your X too. Just don't do it in a shitball way, right? We'll get to the sleazeballs in a minute. But if Tucker gets some business by giving a bunch of shit away for free, that's a good thing. We want him to have a successful business, right? And it's like, God bless my wife, Carrie, this morning. She's working on a list. She's been Googling around of all of our favorite restaurants in Santa Cruz, trying to figure out who's opening, who's doing drive-by pickups and whatever. And she's got a list, and we're going to start going to them. We went to the dumpling place 2 nights ago, and this place is opening up next week with blah 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 blah. Right. So these are the things that we've got to do. And if we can get attention, we can be radically generous, and we can evangelize our category to position ourselves as part of the solution during this tough time, then I think a lot of our businesses have a chance to do better than we otherwise would have. Does that make sense, Andrew?
It makes a lot of sense to me, Christopher. Hey, I want to change gears a little bit. And Rajas had put in the questions to overcome these crisis situations. What should millennials do? P.S. It's a broad question, but want to hear what Christopher thinks.
I don't know that I think that people of how old you are matters. So, I think if you're a millennial, you should ask yourself the following question: if I was a legendary leader, what would I do now? Now, and I think if you're a baby boomer, what you should do is ask yourself the following question: if I was a legendary leader, what would I do now? And I think if you were 16, you could ask yourself, if I was a legendary leader, what would I do now? So I don't have a delineation for millennials per se. I mean, if you have something to contribute, then contribute. If you can help your aunt or your grandma figure out Zoom because you're a more tech savvy millennial and Nana isn't, then contribute that. But like, contribute what you can contribute. Do legendary things. At the end of this crisis, you want to be able to look yourself in the mirror. The person who brushes your teeth in 3 months or 6 months or a year, whenever we get through this thing, and of course we will, but whenever this thing is over, I think we want to be people who, when the person who brushes our teeth in the morning looks at us in the mirror, that person says, you know what? You stood up. You did some shit that mattered. You took care of yourself. You took care of your family. You took care of your community. You know, it was interesting. I was texting with a dear friend of mine, an adopted sister, this morning, and we were talking about the power of the word citizen and this idea of citizenship. You know, I was born a Canadian citizen, so I didn't think a lot about what it meant to be a good citizen. Right. But I became an American citizen. I didn't choose Canada, although I love the shit out of Canada. How's it going, eh? But I did choose to become an American. And so it made me think about citizenship in a way that I never had, because when I sat in this hall in Sacramento with hundreds of other people from countries, in some cases I'd never even heard of, and people were weeping as they became Americans. And there was this huge discussion about what it meant to be a good citizen, what it meant to become an American citizen. So I think asking ourselves, am I doing what a legendary leader would do? Am I doing what a good citizen would do of my country and of, frankly, the fucking world? And I think in 6 months from now or a year from now or whenever this thing's all over, when you look at yourself in the mirror in the morning while you're brushing your teeth, you want to look at that person brushing your teeth and go, you know what? You fucking stood up.
I like it, Christopher. That is powerful. Tom Schwab had put what I think so far is the quote of the call so far, and that was, "If I was a legendary leader, what would I do now?" What a great thought, Christopher. That pretty much sums everything up. Hey, we had also another question from Scott Brody earlier. How do you think business models will change, and what industries do you think are ripe for category design and a different way to think?
I think it's a fascinating question. We have an episode coming up later this week with the world's #1 tech analyst, Ray Wong, and that's one of the things that we talk about. And I'm actually thinking of having him back to dig into it even more. I think that's one of those smart questions, Scott. So here's what I really think. I think if we were smart and we were us, and we're definitely us, if we were smart and we were us, we would ask that question. And I think asking, you know, I'll steal some of John Berghoff's point of view here, right? I think asking questions about what's going to be different, where are the opportunities for massive exponential change here? I think delving into those questions is more powerful than a specific answer. So I think the best thing we can do is continuously ask that question. What do we have an opportunity to exponentially change as a result of this? Is Tucker Max going to be right that this is a new golden age? Now, with that said, there's some obvious things, right? So education is going to get transformed, because after we have several months of distance learning, whether it's with ankle biters or college students and everybody in between, I think people are going to say, I'm not sure about the old model. Here's another one. We just dropped an episode with, she's really an angel on this earth. Her name is Dushka Zapata, and she's one of the most prolific writers on planet Earth and one of the most highly consumed writers. And she was telling me, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this, that one of the yoga instructors she loves is now doing Zoom yogas. Well, and of course, Peloton is a company that's taking off. And then there's another company that has like looks like a giant fucking iPad that's sort of the size of a full-length mirror that you can do workouts and stuff on. So anyway, is the personal training business, the athletic training and all that whole world, is that going to change? Yeah. I'll tell you right now, I don't know that I'd want to be the world's largest owner of commercial real estate used by white collar knowledge workers. I think a lot of people, Scott, are going to wake up and go, why the hell do I spend an hour and a half a day commuting? What do you mean go to an actual meeting? When somebody invites me to go to a meeting, I'm like, what do you mean go to a meeting? Let's just do this. This is way better, right? How many people are in their sweatpants right now? Raise your hand. Right? And so I just think it's going to change the way work gets done in a very profound way. I think it's going to change the way medicine gets done in a very profound way. Why do you have to go see your doctor? There's a whole ton of shit you don't have to go see your doctor for, right? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the question is more important than any one answer. And I think there's going to be big change. And I think there will be big opportunity for massive innovation in categories and products and services for sure.
That's why I see a lot of people rushing in investing right now, stock markets, a lot of great buys out there. The wise people I know are keeping their powder dry, and they're kind of taking a step back, observing, surviving, looking to land on their feet, and then be in a great position to, once this all sorts itself out, 3 months to 18 months from now, is it going to be a V or is it going to be more of a U, to when things start coming back? And from a investing standpoint, I think one is wise to just go slow right now and not rush in with both feet. So what do you think?
Slowly catch the monkey.
Yeah. There's two schools of thought, and they're both by Warren Buffett. One of them is don't catch a falling knife, which we're in right now in the market, and the second is buy when everyone's fearful. Is that a Cutco knife from Hal Elrod?
That's a Cutco knife that you and the GoBros gave me.
Oh goodness, from GoBunnis. What a crappy marketer. I'm our third get.
Yeah, this is the marine knife, the Cutco marine knife, and you even got my name and shit on it. Now, fortunately, I have to go. I'm about to do an episode of Follow Your Different with Navy SEAL turned president of the McChrystal Group. That is to say, Stan McChrystal, as he likes to be called, 4-star General Stanley McChrystal. He and Chris Fussell started the McChrystal Group together. They've written a couple books together on leadership, and so Chris is coming on the podcast to talk about leadership, Navy SEAL strategies and leadership in times of crisis and uncertainty. And so we're going to bang that episode. We're going to have that conversation now.
Well, any parting words in the last minute you have, Christopher?
Look, I'm happy to come back and do this. I'll do this every day if you want. I'm just trying to make a difference. I know all of you are too. And look, I'll just say it. It's corny, but I don't give a shit. I love you. I want you to be well. We can all do this. We will meet this moment. We are meeting this moment. And, for all of you in the One Life community, I just want you to know I love you. And having One Life in my life is a massive blessing. And, I just really want to thank you for all the gifts that you give me.
It's our pleasure, Christopher. First of all, please give Stanley McChrystal a salute from all of us. He's a great man, a great
Will
leader,
do.
as are you. And I'd also love to see a One Life sticker on the lower left as I look. It'd be on your right. So we'll be sending you one.
Yeah, mail me one that has been slathered in Purell.
You got it. Casey will be on that. Anyway, we love you. Hey, we're going to stop the recording, but
Yeah.
if anybody